Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to this North Sydney Council meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone in the public gallery, all of the councillors in attendance here, and to anyone who has joined us online. Before we begin, I'm going to call on Councillor Welsh to give the acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to acknowledge the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. For thousands of years, the Camaragal cared for this place, its lands, its waters, and its skies, maintaining a deep spiritual and cultural connection that continues to this day. I pay respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge the wisdom they have shared across countless generations.
I just call on whoever has their phone on, if you could turn it to silent. Thank you.
I also recognize the strength, resilience, and ongoing contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. As we come together in North Sydney, we honor the rich heritage of the Camaragal and their enduring role as storytellers, knowledge holders, and custodians of this country. May we walk together in a spirit of respect, learning, and reconciliation.
Thank you. Councillors, we've had a request from Councillor Spenceley for a leave of absence. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Santa, seconded by Councillor Keane. I put that to the meeting. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Are there any disclosures of interest for items on the agenda? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, for 10.6, I have a non-pecuniary significant interest because I'm a board member of the Crow's Nest Community Centre.
Councillor Cuff.
Yes, item 10.6, non-pecuniary significant, and I will leave the chamber when it's being discussed.
Thank you. This meeting is
Excuse
being...
me, Madam Mayor, myself.
Oh, sorry.
You're right.
I have 10.6. Mine's not significant or not pecuniary due to being a volunteer at Mary's House. And then I have a significant pecuniary interest for the notice of motion. I'll leave the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. This meeting is being recorded and made publicly available on Council's website. Those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. By attending the meeting, you are giving consent to your image and voice being webcast. A reminder to councillors, council staff and members of the public, you must ensure that mobile phones are turned to silent during meetings of the council. Councillors who need to use their phone to text, talk or engage in social media activity must leave the chamber to do so. That brings us to confirmation of the minutes. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Santos, seconded by Councillor Holding. Any discussion? I put the item. All those in favour? And that is carried. Councillors, there are a number of registered speakers and there are two late requests to speak, one from Mr Michael Bracker of Milson Precinct on Merrill Minute 1 and the other on item 10.9, Dr Anthony Hull. And so is there a procedural motion to include those and the two late registrations?
Yes, I'd like to move a procedural motion that we open the public forum for items 8.1, 10.3, 10.8, 10.9, 10.10, 10.11 and 11.1 so that the speakers can be heard before the items are debated.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Santa. I put the item. All those in favour? And that is carried. That brings us to Merrill Minute 1, the closure of Milsons Point Post Office. There are two registered speakers for here. Bryce Gunn, the President of the Greenway Tenants Group, if you would please come forward and address Council. You can't go. And address the council.
Thank you. My name is Bryce Gunn. I'm the president of the Greenway Tenants Group in Kirribilli. I've come along here tonight because, to be honest, the move by the post office to close down is going to create a very big problem for the elderly and isolated residents of Greenway. I know a few of you know the statistics, but the average age of residents at Greenway currently is about 75. There are 307 units at Greenway, 200 one-bedroom and 107 two-bedroom. Many of the residents are unable to get around unassisted due to their health. We have a number of residents with mobile scooters who need special access. The remaining residents, because they are the older generation, like to pay their monthly and quarterly accounts by hand with hard copy, good old-fashioned cash. The post office is, for many, their only bank where they can do the fortnightly cash transactions. Many residents are unable to pay accounts either by computer or by phone because they have never become educated for that at all. The current staff at Milsons Point Post Office have always provided fantastic service to the residents of Greenway. For many residents, these trips to the post office are often the only contact that they have with the outside world. As an example of social isolation, each year we send a birthday card to our residents. We get so many of them that come in personally and thank us for the birthday card. And it becomes obvious that that was the only birthday card they got that year. So you really understand then how they are isolated from everything. The closest post office is Blues Point, which is 1.75 k. North Sydney, 1.2. North Sydney has 3 steps to get into it. So even if our handicapped people got up there, they can't get in because that post office is not mobility compliant. Neither of these post offices are able to service the residents of Greenway either by foot or by bus. There are steps at the North Sydney, which I have said. Currently, we have a total of 225 residents who have signed the petition, which is a very small part in comparison to what is happening in total. If you really look at what's happened, you will come to the conclusion that it seems to be a decision made by somebody purely and simply for dollars, not caring for the humanity, for the people who live there. And Greenway will suffer badly unless we are able to turn this around. Thank you very much.
Just wait. Are there any questions for the speaker? No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Michael Bracker.
My name is Michael Bracker. I'm here as a representative for the Milson precinct. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, for the ability to speak at late notice. I speak representing the Milson precinct and with the support of the Lavender Bay precinct executive. As detailed in the mayoral minute, the brutal profit for people decision to close the Milson Point Post Office by the federal government and their proxy Australia Post will have serious welfare ramifications for our communities. Milson Post Office is an essential daily service hub for our residents, our businesses, our schools, our over 380 residents of Greenway Housing Community and 120 residents of James Milson Retirement Village. Many residents in our broader community are elderly and mobility restricted. The proposed redirection of them to McMahon's Point and North Sydney is totally unacceptable and impractical. Of particular concern is the welfare of Greenway community. I won't go through the detail. Bryce was brilliant at articulating that. Thank you, Bryce, for doing that for the community. Our community shares exactly the same concerns that Bryce expressed for the Greenway community as genuinely. Our local businesses will also be impacted by this decision. The Milson Point Post Office serves as an essential logistics inflow and outflow for our local businesses. They can ill afford to lose this local service. Councillors, Australia Post generated $5.01 billion in 6 months in 2024-25 and made $249 million profit in that 6 months. The CEO of Australia Post was paid $2.68 million in 2024 by the federal government. There was no community consultation or even reference to existing customers, profiles and usage in this decision. And the apparent increase in rent by Transport for New South Wales was given as the supposed rationale for this closure. This rationale is plainly illogical in terms of the scale of Australia Post. The decision is clearly not based on pressing financial needs or considered social contract. Councillors, community will not sit idle on this matter. We absolutely support the Mayor's motions proposed in the mayoral minute, and we respectfully request Council to consider writing to the Prime Minister as the ultimate decision maker. He himself comes from a social housing background, and it is hoped that he would identify directly with the concerns of the community in this decision. We similarly respectfully request Council to write to the CEO of Australia Post, very directly putting these points strongly on behalf of community. And we also respectfully request Council to write to Premier Minns and the relevant minister, making urgent inquiries on the rental increase relating to this post office to give veracity to the claim by Australia Post. We also challenge our Cammeraygal board councillors to join us, the community, in standing up and fighting beside us on this important matter. Your voice will empower our voice and amplify our voice to be active, participatory and make a difference. Councillors, with your community, we are faced with a brutal profit for people before people decision by our federal government and the proxy Australia Post. We must do everything possible to reverse this cynical decision and care for the welfare of our community. Thank you for your time, your interest and support in hearing our community's needs.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you very much. That brings us to the mayoral minute. I'm just going to slightly add to that. So at 1, that Councillor Wright to the Prime Minister, the Minister for Communications, and the CEO of Australia Post. And a new number 3, that Council write to the Premier and the Minister for Transport and the Minister for Roads, seeking clarification on the rental increase for the Australia Post tenancy, and a request that there be a rent moratorium to support the continued tenancy. So, councillors, you've heard from 2 very eloquent and passionate speakers. This has been a rat act by Australia Post. The first that anyone understood that this was happening was there was a for lease sign put in the on the building that it occupies. The community rightly were distressed and could see the literal writing on the wall. There was no community consultation. There was no consultation in exactly the same way that we have seen Australia Post do over and again. They moved out of the historical North Sydney Post Office without a word to the community or anybody else. Moved into North Point with, as Mr. Gunn said, with less accessibility for the community. They have done the same thing at Crow's Nest, where they moved across into St Leonard's with less accessibility, both for elderly and disabled community members, but especially for small businesses who had relied on postal services on that side of the highway. And here we are once again. We've heard that you saw the letter that they sent on Friday afternoon in response to my urgent letter seeking clarification as to what they were doing, where they announced that they would close on the 12th of November. And to add insult to injury, they suggested not only that North Sydney Post Office or Blues Point were appropriate, but that those who were having difficulty could go to Pitt Street. I've received a lot of correspondence, but I received a correspondence from a highly disabled woman who lives in Greenway today. And she gave me permission to read to you what she feels and thinks about this. And she said, to begin with, that we have seen the removal of banks, newsagents, florists, cobblers, bakeries, and all of which have been replaced with services which already exist, alcohol shops, or provide no value to supporting the community, or have just left with vacant shops in Ennis Road. On a personal level, she said, most of my residency was in other suburbs, but when I moved to Milsons Point, one of the first services I needed was the post office. Back then, Eva and Paul, who are the staff at the post office, were shocking to me because I had moved from another suburb where for 20 years I was unable to have parcels delivered and the post office layout was unsafe for me and the staff had no comprehension of inclusivity nor accessibility. I was stunned at a post office with kind, inclusive, competent staff who actively sought practical solutions that helped me as a person with disabilities. The former manager was horrendously discriminatory, but when Eva came into the role, many residents were exultant that working conditions improved for the staff there and that they provide excellent service and are an active part of the community. They go out of their way to engage and support people in vulnerable groups, and that is a testament to their compassion and public service. Instead of being thrown out because they provide a community service, not a high income-based business, they should be applauded for the brilliant role they play in our community, and it is critical to retain them both within the community and at an accessible location within the community. In a world where people in vulnerable groups generally fail to be supported and rely on the kindness of strangers, the Milsons Point Post Office staff have gone from kind strangers to a treasured part of my disability support team. As I type this, the tears are flowing down my face at the likely grief that I will experience when the public sector callous disregard for community ethics lawfulness will, as usual, rule with their choice being greed. This time, though, the entire community will be affected, residents, workers and visitors alike. As one of my neighbours says, God help us, because no one else will. We are hoping the council will take action to please treat us and our community with respect and stand up for us. I don't know that, having heard from Mr Gunn and Mr Bracker and from that resident, that there's much more than I can say, other than I think that a vital role of the council is to be an advocate for our community and that we must actively be part of that. I've raised this issue with our federal member, Zali Steggall, and she has already made some submissions, but I think she needs to make more urgent submissions. And thankfully, it coincides with two sitting weeks in Canberra. So for all those reasons, I commend the motion to you. Are there any speakers? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering if none of this is successful, whether council will be able to look for appropriate premises for the post office to relocate.
Well, first of all, it's just just call you to order. First of all, it's not council's role to provide Australia Post services. We have to convince the federal government to do their job, and you are well aware of our current constraints. So I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Turnoff. I think it was Councillor Keane was first. You have a light on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am appalled at this decision of the federal government or Australia Post. I spend a lot of time in Milsons Point, and that post office, and to the testament of everybody that's here today, is more than a post office. They know everyone's first names. You walk in, you feel instantly welcomed. The discussions happen in that post office. As has been articulated tonight, it's very much more than a post office. I would like to see this post office remain in Kirribilli, in Milsons Point, on behalf of all our residents.
Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a classic example of market failure in action. There's a reason why Australia Post is publicly owned and not privately owned, and that is it has a vital social welfare service to perform. But unfortunately, it's starting to see more market values than social values. I thoroughly endorse this motion, and I really feel for the residents who've had to suffer this insufferable action by them.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am a Camaragal councillor. I was a nurse for over 35 years. One of the reasons why I ran for council was to help the most socially disadvantaged in our community. And I will stand with you and invite me. If you have a rally, invite me. I will sign your petition. I'm already working with I'm a Labour Party member. I'm a Labour councillor. I've already started with my branch to start a campaign to save this post office. So let me know what I can do, and I will do what I can.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Hoy.
It seems unconscionable that the closure of this post office could be driven simply by commercial motivations. Post offices provide a critical public service and should be beyond the bounds for commercial consideration. I want to thank the speakers for their excellent contributions and endorse every one of their comments. Whether the decision is being driven by Transport for New South Wales rent rises or Australia Post cost cutting, it can't be allowed to stand. I strongly endorse the community opposition to this callous decision, and I'm glad to see the proposed amendments adopted to bring the New South Wales government's role into council's advocacy on behalf of the community. Australia Post should be operated with a sense of community obligation, but the neoliberal economic ideology that permeates government decision-making is bearing its fruits for us. It is cynical, ill-conceived, and harmful decision. I hope that through this forceful show of community opposition, we can bring this decision out into the light and have it overturned.
Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I speak, I was just wondering if you could also write to the Honourable Kate Washington, who is the state member and state minister for families, communities and disability inclusion, and also write to federal member Mark Butler, who is the Minister for Health, Disability and Ageing of Australia. And it is ironic that he has that title, and in every one of his portfolios this decision falls: health, disability and ageing. Like Councillor Welsh, like all councillors around the table, I too am horrified but not surprised that this has been happening. We know that it's happened in Artarmon, we know that it's happening everywhere, all for the almighty dollar. And this has been an ongoing situation where community assets are being moved, sold, and community is being abandoned. And at council, that is our role, as the Mayor said, to stand up and be part and to represent our community, and I'm happy to do whatever it takes. But the fact that it's announced without any community consultation, without any valid reasoning, it can't possibly be money when you see what the executives are paid. It can't possibly be money when it's Transport for New South Wales, which seems to have endless dollars to dig up our roads, build roads we don't want and tunnels we don't want, but they can't allow an Australia Post community asset to survive in an area that is walking distance from somewhere like Greenway. And that's why I think Mark Butler really needs to stand up. He's the Minister for Disability and Ageing of Australia. And if this post office isn't what is needed, then I don't know what is.
Disability and ageing. I'm just taking on both those additional ministers. So are there any other speakers? Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, everyone's spoken very well about this. In particular, I'd like to thank Mr Gunn and Mr Bracker. Mr Gunn really put forward, I think, the human emotion and perspective on what is a very harsh financial decision that's been taken. And as everyone else around the table has said, all we can do here really is just lend our voice of support to try and overturn this decision. So I support this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That brings us to Mayoral Minute number 2. Mayoral Minute number 2 relates to Anzac Park. I'll just speak very briefly to it. As you all know, the Warringah Freeway upgrade and the Western Harbour Tunnel projects are not only denuded our local government area of more than 3,000 trees, but it has meant the permanent loss of hectares of public land at the end of the project. We're not to this day certain of exactly how much that is because Transport have not yet identified the final loss. In any event, I recently attended Anzac Park Precinct and I thought it was a brilliant idea of the precinct who have identified that there are 3 houses that have been acquired by Transport for the project on Camaray Avenue, and that we should write and seek to lobby the Minister for Transport and the Minister for Roads to urge them to include those 3 properties that have been acquired for the project back into the public land to be returned to community care and control at the conclusion of the road works. So I commend the motion to you. Are there any speakers? If there aren't, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? And that is carried. Mayoral Minute number 3 is about a submission on the Berries Bay Place Design and Landscape Plan. In short, as you all know, this is also a child of the Western Harbour Tunnel and Warringah Freeway upgrade projects, in that the Transport is required to deliver a park at the end of the project. It has been subject to the Berries Bay Master Plan, which was very widely community consulted, and that was finalised in February of 2023. And we're now at the pointy end where we're getting to the landscape place and design. There have been many submissions, some from the most affected precincts, but there has been a theme, and the theme that has emerged has been the Woodley's Shed, the community pavilion, to interpret what was there, the design, and also about access to the harbour, particularly for kayaks. In the Mayoral Minute, I've described to you that when Council provided a functional design brief to Transport for New South Wales for any community pavilion, and it's hard to say because what's on exhibition are not plans, it's concepts and pretty pictures. But from what can be gleaned, it certainly looks to be significantly smaller, and certainly in the text it talks about seating for 80 people banquet style, and Council's functional brief was to have a minimum of 120 persons seated theaterette style, and part of that was in the experience of the operation of the Cole Loader Centre for Sustainability. We have hundreds of school children and university students coming through, thousands actually every year, and one of the things that came out of that is that they like to be able to have whole school years to be able to be accommodated in one hit, and not on separate in separate groups. But that also goes to the fact that we have a rapidly increasing population in North Sydney. We currently don't have a public space or community space other than the Hutley Hall that could hold large public or private events, but it's particularly those public events. Year 6 students, when they celebrate the end from the primary schools in this area, go to Norths. Why shouldn't they have a piece of amazing public space on the foreshore at Berries Bay to go to? It needs to be a flexible space. It needs to be large enough to really allow for the level of community that we are going to be serving, particularly in a big regional piece of open space like the Berries Bay and Waverton Peninsula. So And in terms of access to the harbour, it's been a refrain at every mark of this, from master plan through to this concept plan, that there ought to be some formalisation of access for kayaks, because certainly they're informally being launched from that very bay now. And so for all of those reasons, I move that council provide a submission to Transport for New South Wales seeking design changes to the proposed community pavilion or the Woodley Shed site to better address the functional brief provided by council, to provide for a minimum of 120 person seated theatrette style, a simpler form without the upturned boat, which was a really interesting and surprising inclusion, to reflect the historic Woodley Shed footprint and allow for joint use and an indoor-outdoor space, and C, provision for kayaks and other small craft to access the harbour. The thing about this is, in an ideal world, council would have been with the community doing an update to the Waverton Peninsula Master Plan, and it might have been a different process, but we don't want to miss out on good and public foreshore park and access in response to perfect, because the reality is Transport are going to proceed as our ASSI owner with this in any event. So for all those reasons, I urge you to support the motion. Are there any speakers? Councillor Berricky.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your mayoral minute. I have received numerous comments on the design, and that this is design over functionality. And they seem to be, the cost seems to be in the design rather than the functionality of what Transport for New South Wales are offering. Like you, the beauty is in the bay, and having, no one I think knows where the upturned boat came from, except that I guess it's what's called artists' impressions. So I'm more than happy to support this, and I agree with you. This is a once-off opportunity that they have committed to. So all we can do is work with them as closely as we can, and I'm hoping that they will listen to the community, which they are serving, to provide such a functional space and make it more functional.
Thank you. If there aren't any other speakers, the one thing I will say is we fought very hard to retain Woodley Shed. Council had its own structural engineering reports done that contradicted Transport for New South Wales. They could just proceed and demolish it and do as they like. That battle to keep the original form was lost, but we need to have a decent interpretation of what was there that serves a future community. So for those reasons, I urge you to support the motion. I put it to you. All those in favour? And those against? Okay, and that is carried. We now move to those brought forward items. So the first item brought forward is 10.3 July 2025 month-end financial report. There is one person registered to speak, George Loiterton, if you would please come forward.
Good evening, George Loiterton, Cremorne resident, Florence Street. Thank you, councillors, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to speak today. Just got a few questions regarding the July financials, more in particular around the budgeting and how the budgeting operates. Noting that the budget set for this financial year is different to what was presented in the long-term financial plan of November 2024. So I'm just trying to understand a little about the context. I can see that it has improved somewhat since that time, which is obviously encouraging. And obviously we're encouraged to see that. But I'd like to understand the process to update the long-term financial plan and how it's presented in the numbers. I also do note that the main numbers that were presented, and that's the last one, we didn't get to see the unaudited numbers for June closing financial year, had a very similar budget update, which I didn't see an earlier long-term financial plan presented at any stage. So just be great to understand the process, the transparency around when the budgets are set and how they're set.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you very much for your participation. Is there a mover? Councillor Berricky.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Antonini, is there any discussion?
No, I'm happy to save my right of reply. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
There we are.
Councillor Keane.
I'd like to put forward the questions that the Speaker has asked. So when will the long-term financial plan be updated to reflect the current financials? And when will we as a council receive the June financials, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As per our recent councillor briefing, we'll be updating the long-term financial plan. We're aiming for October. In relation to the council financial statements, they are due to be presented to council in October.
And we resolved that way on the 30th of June. So is there any other discussion? Put the item, all those in favour? And that is carried. The next item brought forward is the 10.8, the military 183 to 185 Military Road, Neutral Bay. The first speaker is remote. There are two registered speakers. The first is Mr. Tony Polveri, Director Polveri Planning and Development, and he is attending remotely. Good evening, Mr. Polveri. If you could give your name and who you represent and address the council once you unmute yourself.
Sorry, I think I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, councillors, thank you for this opportunity to address council on the proposed VPA for development at 183, 185 Military Road, Neutral Bay. My name is Tony Polver and I am a planning consultant representing the landowner and proponent in relation to this VPA and the associated planning proposal. The purpose of my presentation tonight is to clarify my client's position in relation to the proposed amendments to the VPA as per the terms outlined in Table 2 of the Council Officer's report you have before you. In particular, I'd like to address the following two key issues in relation to the public benefit of affordable housing. Firstly, that 5% of the total gross floor area of the residential component of the development is to be provided as affordable housing and not 5% of the uplift achieved. And two, the affordable housing must be in perpetuity. In relation to the first issue, the gateway determination issued by the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure that relates to this VPA has a condition that prior to finalisation of the planning proposal, a suitable mechanism must be in place to secure 5% affordable housing on the site. This VPA is our initial attempt at providing a suitable mechanism for this affordable housing. My client has considered providing affordable housing on the site, and we believe a suitable outcome can be negotiated in relation to how much affordable housing is provided. The Strategic Planning Panel of the Sydney North Planning Panel recommended at least 5% affordable housing be provided as part of the planning proposal, and this was justified because council no longer required a community facility to be located on this site. Otherwise, affordable housing would not have been considered warranted. However, what is of more concern is the second issue and council officers' proposition that this affordable housing be provided in perpetuity. The affordable housing component of this planning proposal, we believe, should not be provided in perpetuity, but should be provided for at least 15 years, more in accordance with the provisions for infill affordable housing in the State Environmental Planning Policy for Housing. The council officer's report you have before you provides details in relation to the planning proposal for the adjoining Woolworths site, and how the gateway determination for that site also included a condition that the proposal be updated to investigate opportunities for the provision of 5% affordable housing as a key public benefit. It is noted that Woolworths had investigated the feasibility of providing affordable housing, and that it was eventually determined the proposal would not be financially feasible if affordable housing was included.
Mr. Polveri, that's your 3 minutes. If you could,
already?
finish up. Yep.
Okay. Look, I did want to say that my client is a long-term resident in the area, and he understands what's happening in the area. So he's included a provision for an additional 0.5 to 1 floor space ratio for non-residential floor space. The 15-year requirement under the housing set balances incentives for development with a guarantee of meaningful, lasting affordability and ensures that affordable housing remains accessible. Imposing a requirement for the affordable housing to be provided in perpetuity is generally very onerous.
Mr. Polveri, I'm going to have to cut you off there because you're more than a minute over. But I will ask if there are any questions of you from any of the councillors.
Sure.
And there are not. So thank you very much for your participation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another registered speaker on this item, and that is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. If you would please come forward. Mr. Polveri, if you could mute yourself.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Meredith Trevelyan-Jones. I'm a resident of Cremorne. In 2023, Planning Minister Paul Scully said, "Green Square is a true demonstration of why successful places are underpinned by connecting housing growth with infrastructure delivery." He then talked about infrastructure delivery in partnership with developers and councils. The Green Square Urban Renewal Project has seen the delivery of an award-winning library, a large aquatic centre, 40 new parks and new streets, walkways and bike paths. The success in delivery of community infrastructure is the result of a value capture strategy involving detailed planning, establishing funding needs and inextricably linking the planning controls, the LEP and the DCP, to the strategies and plans. Much of the infrastructure is being paid for by developers, taking up bonus provisions in the LEP, which allow an increase in density on specific sites if contributions are made for infrastructure. North Sydney Council's planners in the past have advised that using the LEP to require the provision of community infrastructure is problematic because North Sydney generally doesn't use FSR to control density. As a member of the Neutral Bay Alive consultation group, I asked, why can't council look at a bonus scheme for the provision of community infrastructure in Neutral Bay Village with the provisions incorporated in the LEP? We were told the minister doesn't like bonus provisions. Really? The state government has put in place a housing policy where developers can achieve a 30% bonus in height or floor space if they provide some affordable housing. So it's using bonus provisions in its own policies. And in any case, ministers come and go. We shouldn't be trying to craft our policies to cater to the whims of the minister of the day. And here we are, considering a bare minimum public benefits offer from a developer which owns a portion of the much larger site the planners said could deliver significant public benefits. The higher the buildings, the more public benefits would be provided, they said. But each landowner is avoiding providing public benefits, saying they only own a part of the site. Woolworths has offered a cut-down plaza, it's more like a food court, and an arcade as a link to Yeo Street, rather than the open-to-sky through-site link the planners specified. It's all voluntary. Equity Link originally offered a 350 square metre community facility, not the 1,000 square metre facility the planners wanted. Why? Why? Equity Link only owns a third of the site. Now they're offering a footpath widening on Military Road. Well, that's good. And a funny shaped leftover bit of space adjacent to the Woolworths Plaza. And now they're arguing about 5% of residential apartments as affordable housing shouldn't be in perpetuity. Well, you don't have too many options, councillors. You probably have to take it. In Green Square, by the way, 15% of the housing will be social housing and affordable housing in perpetuity. And that's another provision that's built into their LEP. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Yes, councillor Holding.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand you have a long background in looking at this subject, and obviously with the limited amount of time that you've had, do you see any other pathway that we could consider?
In relation to this particular development where it already has gateway approval, I think your options are limited. Really, I mean, this is something that needs a long-term strategy, and it should have been built in place a long time ago. I mean, back when Military Road Corridor Planning Study was in gestation.
Thank you.
Doesn't stop you from doing something going forward.
Thank you for your participation. Councillor Berrigan.
Madam Mayor, I have a motion.
Yep.
Which I have sent into governance. Okay, so it's item 1 that reads.
Can you send it now?
Can I send it to? I'll quickly forward it to you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Assuming I can do that. Should have gone through. It says hopefully. I think I might have just, okay. Come up with send. No?
Then maybe.
Oh,
If
it's not too
working, you
much,
can
but
dictate it.
yes, I will. Thank you, Mayor. So item 1. Just with an amendment.
An addition or?
An addition. That council resolved to accept in principle the letter of offer provided at attachment 1 to enter into a VPA for the provision of affordable housing and public domain improvements subject to the terms outlined in table 2 of this report, and with the following change below, which says that, and we can copy from the report, so it can say the vet. Just come now. Oh, it has. Okay. So the motion I'm proposing is to amend the table to say that the terms of the VPA should specify that up to 30% and no less than 5% of the total gross floor area of the residential component of the development is to be provided as affordable housing in perpetuity, and the rest is the same. And item 2, 3 and 4 remain as are.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Antonini, wish to speak to it?
Thank you. I will briefly speak to it, to the motion, and also thank the Speaker for coming to address Council. Yes, the decision has been made, but that doesn't stop Council still pushing for what is still an unreasonable small amount of affordable housing for a significant uplift. We should be making a noise about it all the time, and the idea that it's not in perpetuity is something that you can't consider. Since when will we have affordable housing in Neutral Bay if it's not in perpetuity?
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Keane. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I agree, it's a significant uplift, and I agree with Councillor Berrigan's amendment and will support it.
Are there any other speakers?
One last thing, sorry, just to add to my last piece is, again, in consultation, can we please add social media so that we are reaching a wider demographic when we go forward, please.
We're not, it's not up to us to do it, it's the state government.
But can we look at some ways that we do encourage them to look at social media? Because it's only sitting in sort of static places where we really need to encourage a further reach so that we can actually reach other demographics.
Are there any other speakers? I'll just briefly speak in support before I return it to the mover. This is a furphy that somehow, with this huge additional uplift over the existing controls, that 5% is a big ask and that it should only be for 15 years and that the housing set provisions should prevail. This is a state government that says that they trumpet that it should be 30% on their own land and are not delivering that. It's within our own planning study that any affordable housing in this precinct be in perpetuity. And there's a reason for that, because all that happens is that it's buying indulgences. You provide 15 years worth of affordable housing for to override the local controls, and 15 years later they become back what they were always intended to be, the luxury units on a great transport hub. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting the motion as put by Councillor Berricky. Do you wish to speak any further?
No, thank you, Mayor.
I'll put the item, all those in favour, and that is carried. That brings us now to the next brought forward item, which is 10.9, the proposed DCP amendment. And we have one speaker, Dr. Anthony Hull, who will be joining us remotely.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Hull. We can hear you. If you would like to address the council and give your name and who you represent, that would be great.
Thanks very much, everybody. And thanks for letting me present remotely tonight. My name is Dr. Anthony Hull. I'm the Deputy Chair of Doctors for the Environment Australia in New South Wales and an anaesthetist. I would like to firstly commend Council for considering item 10.9 tonight with regards to electrification of new residential developments. And I'll be speaking in support of this proposal, in particular in relation to the adverse health impacts of gas use in homes. In order to remain fairly time efficient, I'll read a co-sponsored evidence-based statement from Doctors for the Environment Australia and the Royal Australasian College of Physicians as pertaining to gas use in homes. The latter organisation, I might just add, is an umbrella organisation for many medical specialties in Australia and New Zealand, including paediatrics, cardiology, oncology, and respiratory medicine. And the statement itself goes like this. In light of the widely researched and significant health impacts of home gas appliance use, we call for a cessation of gas connections to all new residential buildings and developments and the phase out of gas appliance use in homes. We also call for mandatory labelling on gas appliances. Burning gas indoors creates air pollution that's proven to be damaging to health and that lingers in the indoor air for hours after a gas appliance has been used. This is exaggerated in our more airtight modern homes. Examples of the pollutants include nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde and benzene. The latter is a significant carcinogen. Given most people spend the majority of time inside their homes, this is concerning. Evidence has shown the risk of a child being diagnosed asthmatic is 30% greater with gas in the home, mainly due to the nitrogen dioxide exposure and similar to indoor cigarette smoke exposure. There is also an increased risk of worsened asthma symptoms and bronchitis for all occupants. Asthma cost Australia, by the way, $28 billion in 2015. Indoor gas use is estimated to be responsible for 12% of our total national childhood asthma burden. Exposure to nitrogen dioxide pollution has also been associated with increased risk of dementia and cognitive decline. And indoor gas use, particularly the use of heaters, also risks carbon monoxide poisoning, which often goes undiagnosed as symptoms can be confused with flu or food poisoning, and also entails additional longer-term symptoms such as worsening memory, changes to mood and behaviour, and significant exposures can lead to death and near misses, as unfortunately still occur in Australia. As physicians, we believe effective prevention is the best and most effective method for reducing these harms. And when there are equivalent or better electric alternatives to gas appliances that do not carry the above mentioned health risks, we should be changing our practices to protect the public and moving to fully electric homes as a priority. Thank you. That was the total statement that I just read out there that some of you hopefully have already read. You may have seen it before.
Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you very much for your participation. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Welsh, seconded by Councillor Antonini. Is there, Councillor Welsh, speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Dr. Hull, for your very knowledgeable presentation. Much appreciated. Okay, tonight we're here considering a change to the North Sydney Development Control Plan that would prohibit gas connections and the installation of gas appliances in new residential developments. This is an important step forward. Eliminating gas from new builds is better for our environment. It reduces greenhouse emissions and moves us closer to meeting our climate goals. It is also better for people's health, as been outlined by Dr. Hull, particularly for children, as Dr. Hall said. We know that gas appliances contribute to indoor air pollution, which increases the risk of asthma and other respiratory illnesses. And finally, it's better for households' budgets. As our society continues to electrify and renewable energy becomes cheaper, households that are all electric will save money in the long run. In short, cleaner, healthier, cheaper. This is a common sense change that will benefit our community now and into the future. I support the recommendation.
Councillor Hoy.
In its recently released inaugural annual report, the Net Zero Commission highlighted New South Wales's lack of progress on our climate targets and particularly identifies our failure to pursue electrification as a key failure. The report finds New South Wales is not on track to meet emission reductions targets, and the built environment sector is the worst performer, having nearly doubled greenhouse gas emissions between 2005 and 2022, while all other sectors have reduced theirs. It found that compared to other jurisdictions, quote, the New South Wales government currently has neither regulations nor targets to drive building electrification. Unlike Victoria and the Australian Capital Territory, New South Wales has not placed restrictions on gas connections to new homes or development, end quote. Instead, the New South Wales government's current policy initiatives introduced in 2022 merely encourage but not mandate large new buildings to be all electric, along with some subsidies through programs like the Energy Savings Scheme. The New South Wales Labor government, in bed with property developers and fossil fuel barons alike, has repeatedly stated that banning gas is, quote, not a priority. As the rest of the world electrifies everything, New South Wales households stuck on gas will be locked into increasingly expensive energy bills, and more people will be forced into energy poverty. Low-income households and renters will inevitably bear the brunt if we do not stop building new gas connections and start helping households make the switch. A just and equitable energy transition means making sure no one is left behind and no one bears the brunt of irresponsible government inaction. Even the property industry is supportive of banning gas. The City of Sydney Council recently became the latest New South Wales council to mandate electrification in new residential developments. This was publicly backed and commended by the Property Council of Australia, the Owners Corporation Network of Australia, Asthma Australia, and other peak bodies for health, housing, and environment. The National Policy Director of the Property Council of Australia, Frankie Muscovich, said of the changes, this is a clear step towards cleaner, cheaper, all-electric buildings, and it's what the future demands. We support it. Every new building built with gas today is one that will need to be upgraded later at greater cost. So targeting new buildings first, where the change is easier and cost-effective to make, is a no-brainer, end quote. Analysis by 350.org shows that average household in North Sydney would save over $600 a year with a wholly electrified house. It goes further and shows that as well as saving that much per year, the cumulative emission savings for wholly electrified residential dwellings in North Sydney would amount to 192,926 tonnes of carbon equivalent emissions over the next 40 years. The Victorian government's plan has been analysed by the Energy Efficiency Council. It found that electrification of Victoria's buildings could free up an average of 80 petajoules a year through to 2035 to support industries impacted by high prices and gas supply shortfalls. Electrification will drive down not just household energy prices, but the energy prices of industry and business as well. Claims of gas shortfalls fall flat in the face of this fact. We do not need to dig or drill more gas. We need to be smart with the way that we use it, with electrification and efficiency improvements delivering climate and economic benefits across society, from households to industry. And it's really important to consider where the gas is coming from. In New South Wales, we look to the Pilliga and the communities in that area. The Gomeroi people have been fighting the potential filthy gas exploitation project up there. They've been fighting the exploitation of the people in that community. Those who want to stay on gas want to open up that filthy reserve. That cannot be allowed to happen. We need to go further and faster and get off gas altogether. It's not just economic and environmental grounds that make the case for getting off gas, however. We know that phasing out gas connections and gas appliances is critical for meaningful climate action. We also know that it's important to reduce what is now a really well-established health hazard. Some of the arguments that get trotted out in defense of the gas industry these days honestly feels like the kinds of arguments that were trotted out by the tobacco industry when the government started to take meaningful action to address the harms of cigarette smoke. We know that 12% of childhood asthma in Australia is now being caused by indoor air pollution, including from gas appliances. For children who are growing up in households with gas appliances, it can be similar to living in a household with exposure to secondhand cigarette smoke. I think most people who are either moving into properties with gas kitchen appliances or who are choosing to purchase new gas appliances probably have no idea that is the case. There is a significant educational piece needed. It should be the responsibility of government to tell people the facts that we now know. Asthma Australia, the Lung Foundation Australia, and Doctors for the Environment Australia have all been really clear in calling not only for people to understand this, but also for meaningful initiatives to support people to transition to clean, healthy electric appliances in their home. I support this motion. I lament that it's only new dwellings, but it's an important step. And I look forward to us coming back very soon and following the lead of councils like Leighton Cove and expanding this rule so we can set North Sydney up for a gas-free future.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers before I go back to the mover? I'm going to speak very briefly. As you know, I put forward a mayoral minute on this. It's beyond time that this council joins our neighbours and others across the nation. It is a first step. I support Councillor Hoy's enlightened comments entirely. It just seems so familiar that we had 10 lost years of the climate wars at the federal and to some extent at the state level. And during that time, it was local government that took up the slack. We were one of hundreds of councils that declared a climate emergency in 2019. And we have ambitious net zero targets. The hardest part of achieving our net zero targets is the 65% reduction that comes down to community contribution. And this is yet another way that we can assist our community to help reduce those meet those targets. But the reason it feels so jarringly familiar is that in this state, New South Wales will not follow the ACT and Victoria, and it ought to be doing so. And we must continue to press the state government to do it on a much more ambitious, mandated on a much more ambitious level so that it isn't having to be fought local government area by local government area. I commend the motion. Do you wish to speak? I'm good. I'm going to put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. Thank you very much for your participation, Dr. Hull. That takes us to the next brought forward item. And that is 10.10 Fire and Rescue New South Wales Inspection Report 229 Miller Street, North Sydney. There is one registered speaker, Davey McDonald. You would please come forward.
Councillors, good evening. I will be very brief. I just had a concern with part of the what you're reading in front of you, where it talks about this inspection report, and it's considered routine and relatively minor for a building of the size that it's referring to. My concern with that is that you've got two items there to vote in support of. Totally agree with that, but I feel that that report needs to have a completion date attached to it, because although to some lay people it may be considered relatively minor and unimportant, I can assure you, as a person who is now a qualified village and structural firefighter, that it's critically important that those things that are deemed unimportant to the community can be in fact very crucial. You know, a smoke alarm that doesn't work or it's not connected properly, so on and so forth. So that's what I would ask you to consider and maybe add an amendment to what you have here for a completion date. I did leave a message for Marcello earlier on and we haven't been able to catch up on it. And if I may, Mayor, I've got a few minutes here to say.
No, I'm going to require you to stick with the
Okay.
item that you're here to address.
Okay, all right, that's
Thank
okay.
you. Are there any
Right.
questions of the speaker?
Yes.
Councillor Keane.
What's a reasonable completion date that you've put forward that you're suggesting?
I really, I mean, sooner rather than later, but I would think that Marcello would take that on board, frankly. I think maybe a fortnight, but I don't know. That their department is so heavily overworked at the present time. Ideally yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by councillor Beregi.
Madam Mayor, I'm
Seconded.
happy to move a third, that council receive an update from the director in relation to timeframes for implementation.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Santos, is there any discussion? I'll put the item, all those in favour? And that is carried. That brings us to the next brought forward item, 10.11, North Sydney Olympic Pool Redevelopment Project Update. Again, Mr McDonald is the registered speaker.
Hi. The reason I'm standing here before you is that I'm concerned that again we have an item that is being held in camera or a closed session. As a person that was engaged from the very beginning of the first consultations on the swimming pool, I, in my ignorance, failed to understand why now a project update should necessarily be closed to public knowledge. I say so because, as I understand it, the architects, with the council is suing the architects. I'd love to know what it is the architects may have done wrong, and vice versa, they're suing council. I take that from what I'm told. It may or may not be true, but I do feel that at the last election, councillors, especially the Real Independents and the Labor councillors, I won't attribute this to the Greens, came with a policy of transparency and openness. And I, having been somebody that's followed this all the way through, would really like to know more information. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you very much. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Moved by councillor Beregi, seconded by councillor Holding. Does anyone wish to speak to it? I'm going to speak briefly to it. We have a very open update, more open than most other councils on their major projects. We did that deliberately for transparency and accountability. But of course, like other councils on major projects, there is legal professional privilege and commercial in confidence. At the very end of the project and at the end of the litigation, I know that this council will release everything, including the whole of the PwC independent report. But the fact is that we will be damaging council's prospects to secure any additional funds that we may be able to secure if we were to waive legal professional privilege or commercial in confidence matters. So it would be reckless in the extreme if council were to do that at this point. If there's no other speakers, I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. That brings us to the next brought forward item. Notice of motion LGNSW Destination and Visitor Economy Conference from Councillor Santa, 11.1. There is one registered speaker, Davey McDonald.
Councillors, I'm here basically with multiple reasons why you should object and not pass this policy that's in front of you, because that's what it is at the present time. It is without costings, and it has not got any forward estimates attached to it. Now, I know it says in the report, and I read it at great detail, and there's a lot to unpack in it, that when it becomes affordable, that the consideration be to implement this policy. That's somewhat putting the horse before the cart, in my opinion. Also, it talks about giving council the task of identifying areas and of identifying places of interest. I've got 14 here, plus another one, which would make 15, and I could list them off to you. It doesn't take a lot of time to do that, but it is going to take somebody in council to do that. I think the other thing is very important here is that organically we are already a destination for tourism, and the importance of the conference, conference which is called the Destination and Visitor Economy Conference, is designed and intended for those regional councils that have struggled with employment, jobs and growth, especially through COVID, the bushfires and floods. And the intention of that conference is specifically to network with other regional councils that may be alongside them, and very much in a circular fashion. It doesn't apply as a model, taking it from what was spoken at that conference by the Tweed Mayor, where the regional councils want to grab and grasp the high value opportunities of tourism for their economies. And I feel that this is actually counterproductive to those regional councils. To conclude, I think this policy detracts from the aim of those regional councils. And I'm sorry, councillor, but essentially you've taken a cut and paste of a model that you consider to impose on our environment, which is very different from that experienced in the regions. And I think that the critical thing here is no forward estimates, no budget, the very thing that you were criticised for by IPART. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. Councillor Santa, do you wish to move your motion?
Yes, motion is.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Welsh. Could I ask if you would if you would take on some additional words? Sure. That at 2, after that, subject to resourcing and further council resolution, council undertake a program. Sorry, can you repeat that? Subject to resourcing and further council resolution, comma, and then delete the words when sufficient funds become available. And then the same words inserted after that in item 4. I think it makes it clear that this motion is not leading to an immediate work in circumstances where it isn't in the delivery or operational plan. And it requires us to have both resources and a further consideration by council, if you would take that on.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologise to, sorry, I'll speak.
Yeah, put on your.
I apologise to my council colleagues if they believe that this motion and my speech are repetitions of a similar motion I introduced to council about this time last year. But there have been some new developments since then, most notably the sad fact that as a result of the failure of the SRV application, we've had to postpone the appointment to council staff of an economic development manager as previously approved by Council. One of the purposes behind this motion is therefore to ensure that awareness of the potential advantages for our LGA is maintained until the happy day when we can appoint a suitably qualified person to this position, so we can get on with the necessary task of establishing permanent staff-to-staff communication with colleagues in the tourism industry and the government-based tourism industry facilitating organisations, notably Tourism Australia and Destination New South Wales. Last year, I noted the vast array of existing and potential tourism sites and activities here, including the best harbour views in Sydney, beautiful harbourside parks with beautiful walks along tracks like Smoothie Park and Flat Rock Creek, containing rare coastal rainforest, angophorus and mangroves. And I must confess, I have to take issue with Mr. McDonald there when he says that this product, we already have tourism product. I know for sure that sadly, most tourism products, both international and domestic, which is packaged by wholesalers, bypasses this North Shore area. We also have First Nations petroglyphs and middens, interesting settler history for both domestic and international visitors, such as the origin of the naming of Neutral Bay and the home of May Gibbs at Nutcote. Charming restaurants and coffee shops with a European ambience in Kirribilli, Neutral Bay and Crow's Nest, and harbourside icons like Luna Park, the Coal Loader, and yes, the pool. I should also add to the list the Hayden Orpheum, which is an artistic throwback to the golden age of cinema, and which, thanks to council foresight, is a now heritage-listed building. The wonderful Ensemble Theatre, set in its glorious harbourside location and a second home for Australia's most gifted playwright, David Williamson. And North Sydney Oval, with its unique green roof traditional stands in a beautiful park setting. There was an interesting article in yesterday's Sun Herald about the challenges and opportunities in this social media age for operators of cinemas and theatres. It alluded to the need for these venues to diversify the entertainment they provide. The article quotes the general manager of the Hayden Orpheum, Alex Temesvari, who says that with its offerings of live artists, concerts and stand-up comedy, quote, we're a special event cinema where people come for interactive screenings, classics, book launches and premieres. It's about the wild and wacky here. A further addition to the list could be outdoor theatre like Shakespeare in the Park, and musical events in, for example, the old fuel storage cutouts at Carradar Park, and the new park being developed with the cooperation of Transport for New South Wales at Berries Bay. With all this, North Sydney has a great concentration of artistic and sporting icons in Australia. We should be seen to be a mecca for these experiences. I also noted last year that we need a CBD with a thriving day and nighttime economy like Sydney City has developed over the last 10 or so years. I have some more weird and wacky ideas. Would or should it be possible for the owner of the old South Stane ferry to bring his ferry around from Berries Bay to the Coal Loader and re-establish it as a floating restaurant? An idea which has been presented to me by a colleague could be that the two renovated buildings at the old quarantine depot in Berries Bay be converted to accommodation, a development which is already commonplace in coastal areas of New South Wales for old lighthouses. Here's another one. How about a dedicated lift system in a CBD office building, taking tourists and diners to a rooftop terrace to take advantage of the finest view of the finest harbour in the world? One of the sad aspects of our current financial position and inability to fund the economic development manager position is that the object of such a position would be both to help grow the bottom line for current businesses and also to expand the opportunities for the establishment of new businesses, thereby increasing council revenues. As noted in this report on the Tourism Conference, a number of council representatives, notably Tweed Shire, Orange and 7 councils represented on the Northern Rivers Tourism Management Group, pointed out that tourism is contributing substantially to their bottom lines. Through percentages, they can charge on tourism product packages developed for their regions and through increased rate revenue from the new businesses established there as a result of tourism growth. I commend this report and recommendations to council and staff colleagues and urge you, when we are in a financial position to do so, to take advantage of tourism's exciting opportunity for North Sydney. Let us also get a bit wild and wacky.
Are there any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Holding.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to speak briefly. I admire Councillor Santa's enthusiasm for tourism, and I do support this recommendation motion. I just wanted to highlight the fact that obviously, despite our financial position, we as an area do run events. We've got the Sydney Marathon coming up very, very shortly, which should be a a massive event. We've just had the British Lions, which is an Irish, I should mention, Lions, in the last, which is a 12-year cycle and has been very financially successful. And we hosted aspects of that at North Sydney Oval. We've also got a cycling event coming up. I forget the name of it right now. Spring Cycle. There's a host of things that are happening, and considering the financial position that we're in, our area is one that is always looking for those opportunities. And so I congratulate Councillor Santa on his enthusiasm for this.
Are there any other speakers? I'll put the item. All those in favour and those against, and that is carried. If we could invite Councillor Keane back into the chamber. Councillors, that takes us back to the ordinary agenda, the rest of the agenda. Is there a procedural motion for some items by exception? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose that the following items are moved on Globo. Item 10.1, item 10.4, item 10.5, item 10.7, and item 10.12.
Is that acceptable to everyone around the room? Is there a seconder for that procedural motion? Councillor Santa, I'll put the item. All those in favour? And that is carried. So that leaves us with item 10.2. Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a motion. The motion is that we receive the quarterly budget review. The council note the impact that funding constraints is having on council's performance and its ability to deliver projects and services. The council note that the capital expenditure is lower than the original budget due to projects being deferred and the delay in the North Sydney Olympic Pool project. The council note that staff costs are below budget due to the holding of vacancies to improve council's liquidity in the short term. The council acknowledged the Q4 highlights across a range of areas, which include environmental care, community education, neighbourhood activation, supporting young people, families and children, community inclusion, multicultural engagement, volunteering, housing and homelessness, roads and pedestrian safety, active transport, lighting improvements, the enhancement of parks and public spaces, and noting that the engagement of the North Sydney community, which has resulted in behaviour change from council's waste reduction workshops, over 1,500 attendees at the Youth Week Colour Festival, the reach of the library Instagram, which grew by 275%, and the new active transport infrastructure, including raised crossings and cycling infrastructure.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Antonini. Do you wish to speak to?
I will just briefly. This is not a nice report really to read, and I think that it's important that rather than just receiving the report, we actually note what is happening. And when we read that we have projects not progressing, mostly due to funding constraints, we've had to discontinue a project. This is not sustainable, and we're relying on capital expenditure being lower than the original budget due to projects being deferred, and that we're improving our liquidity by holding staff vacancies. This is not a sustainable position, barely in the short term, definitely not in the medium term and in the long term. However, I did want to say that despite all of this, the council is doing amazing things. And when I look at the range of projects and the community involvement, it's twofold. One, it is amazing the services that the council offers, and two, we only heard today about the closing of the post office, and that's just the continuation of the closing of other community spaces, or what people viewed as being places of the community to meet, and we now no longer have people being able to go into their bank. Now we don't have post offices, and this just makes the services that their local council offers just so much more important. So I commend the staff on really what has been a fantastic range of services that we have, the council has provided in what is really, really difficult times.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to thank you, Councillor Berge, for just summing up everything that the council has done in this last quarter. But I just wanted to bring forward a couple of things that aren't being done because of our funding constraints. For example, the installation of drainage upgrades to all sports fields at Primrose Park has been deferred. Now, I've just been in Bankstown over the weekend, and the funding, the sport infrastructure there is breathtaking. And I was sitting there, trying to count how many football fields do we have in North Sydney. And then one of our major football fields is Primrose Park. And imagine with all the rain, it is in desperate need of this upgrade, but it's being referred. I mean, it's being deferred. So the project delivery is now scheduled to commence in 2026-27, subject to funding being secured through grants, additional rates, or alternative income sources or operational savings. Who knows if it will be done by 2027? We don't have enough fields, and the fields that we do have are being overutilized. And so therefore the kids aren't getting their playtime that they so desperately need. We want to, we think about the Cremorne Plaza. How long has Cremorne been waiting for their plaza? Years and years. And again, they'll be waiting years and years more. So we're really suffering because we don't have the financial ability to properly care for our assets. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? I'll put the item. All those in favour? And those against? And that is carried. That brings us to the final item, 10.6. Councillor Carr and Welsh. Councillor Berge.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Santa. Could I ask the mover and seconder to take on some additional words?
Yes.
I've provided them and they're bolded. So what I'm asking you to take on is at the end of 1, and that the review include governance arrangements for the community centres. And then an item number 6, that in order to reduce inherent conflicts of interest and promote participation in decisions relating to the use and maintenance of council assets and the allocation of public funds, council urges sitting councillors serving on community centre boards to resign from those positions. And if I may just speak very briefly to why I'm asking you to take that on. I served on the Crows Nest Community Centre because I was and have always been someone who represented Crows Nest. And I found it to be an exercise in terrible conflicts on that board, because with my councillor hat on, I was unable to participate in so much. But worse, conflicts in this chamber, because on items like this, I was unable to be a voice for the people I had been elected to represent. And in the end, I decided that I had run to represent Crows Nest and not the Crows Nest Centre. Over the next 12 to 24 months, we will not only be reviewing but and doing a comprehensive review of these community grants and subsidies, which are vital to, as a lifeline to many organisations in our community, and I would also say to support a creative heart in our community. But we will be considering additional funding, additional needs, in a context where we have an increasing population, an increased appetite for community connection. And as we deliver on our social inclusion strategy and our creativity and culture strategies, I think it's vital that every councillor who can participate ought to do so in this chamber. Community centres have become, by the very nature of the services that they provide, and particularly because of council's support with buildings, parking subsidies and substantial grants, they've become an extension of council's operations. Serving on a community centre board raises multiple conflicts of interest. Even at when we adopted the delivery and operational plan on that meeting on the 30th of June, unless I had moved to that procedural motion that allowed us to move to take out the two community centres, we would have had a situation where two councillors could not have done what is the essential role of a councillor, which is to adopt the budget. And many other councils wouldn't have necessarily supported that action. But it's important, I think, that we plan to facilitate having two councillors who clearly have a passion for community services to be part of the careful work and the decisions we're going to be making around those buildings and that grant funding. We can't mandate that they do, but I think that we should encourage, particularly around strengthening good governance, because you're equally conflicted in your role on the board as you are in this chamber. I think we should be urging and encouraging councillors to participate, particularly in support of good governance. So if the mover and the seconder would take those words on, I would be grateful.
I'm happy to take them on.
And the seconder. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to that?
I will just briefly. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the report from the council staff. It is, especially at this point in time, when we are in a financially difficult position, everything has to be looked at. And it's a wonderful report, really going through not just the allocation of the funds, but sadly, the number of people that are looking for funds. So at this point in time, it's a really excellent report to give us a foundation to move forward. Secondly, Madam Mayor, I do support your amendments. I think you make choices whether you want to run for council and represent the entire North Sydney local government area, or you want to represent a community centre, and it's pretty difficult to do both.
Councillor Santa.
Thank you, Mayor. I must confess that I support your amendments. I've had some experience at both federal and state government level with being representing the respective government on a committee such as these community centres. And at state and federal level, there is written in the Code of Conduct that members of Parliament, of either the Parliament, may not be on the boards of these organisations because of this strong conflict of interest. And therefore it devolves to staff members, bureaucrats usually representing the respective governments on those boards. So I was quite surprised when I first got this gig to see that this situation existed. And so I'm very much in support of the amendment that you've proposed.
Are there any other speakers? Before I give it back to you, Councillor Berge, I'd just like to support what you said about the quality of this report. I can't recall, having served on council, having had the level of detail around not only the grants, but around the in-kind subsidies. And I think that that's important for us to understand exactly what we're giving to various organisations, and to then have a lens and a framework around, is it delivering to the highest priority and need. I think the most tragic reading that I've had in this agenda was looking at all those not recommended creative grants. When you read each one of them and what people were seeking, and the small amounts that they were asking for, it is really quite a shameful thing that one of the three most affluent local government areas in the country is not able to extend to all of those 47 applicants to support arts and culture in our community. So thank you for drawing that out. And if you wish to say some final words, I'll put the item.
Thank you, Mayor. I did actually, I did find the report, like you, just amazing, because what it does is it tells us what is available in our community if we had the funding. And I would like to encourage, maybe the report doesn't say low priority as a reason. I don't think it's a low priority. It's pretty crass. There's no, funding is not available. I'd hate for anybody really to think that it's a low priority. I think for me and for many in the community, these are amazingly high priorities. And I think reading the report will shock a number of people in the community of what they could have if only we could fund it.
I'm going to put the item, all those in favour and those against, and that is carried. We'll invite the councillors back in before we formally close the meeting. We welcome back Councillor Carr and Councillor Welsh, and that brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you all for your participation this evening. Until the next time.
Sure.